Hello and welcome back again to Rage Gaming and more Diablo 4 Season 5. Today we're doing a little discussion and look at the 5 classes and their best build now that the dust has settled and Season 5 is firmly underway. People have had time to really achieve ideal sets, the top players and hardcore grinders for longer periods reaching that kind of perfect gear. With that in mind, the best builds have really started to take in their form, and we see that in some of the highest potential clears in the pits, and then obviously how efficiently they're destroying Tier 8 Infernal Hordes, our current highest version, with, high Aether counts. What's funny about that is even the best builds for some classes aren't very good at farming Aether. Though I do think a lot of the best builds are pretty well known at this point, so I want to do a little bit of a discussion as well about what I hope for the class in the DLC and the next season to come with it. So let's talk about it. So first up, I want to talk about Sorcerer because it's pretty clear cut who the winner is, but it obviously has that recent quote-unquote controversy where it was nerfed. So the top build for Sorcerer is still the Lightning Spear focused one, which is kind of a new build for the season. They updated or reworked an aspect, Splintering Energy. Basically means the Conjuration skill Lightning Spear can deal increased damage per hit. I believe the numbers were 16% up to over 100% increase, so it's like a massive 5x increase. With a lot of CDR and your ideal stats, not only is it hitting hard, but you're generating a ton of these to deal ridiculous damage. And that's where the nerf comes in. As Josh explained it to me, when you're reaching the real perfect gear status, this is a pretty big nerf, around a 40-50% nerf compared to before. We've got massive amounts of the mastery and the actual amount of lightning spears out at once. That is no longer as effective as it once was. But compared to your average player who's not even reaching those numbers, say generating around 20-25 lightning spears, they're not feeling it by comparison. We see it at the top levels though, where previously the top pit clear before nerf was a 157, and now as I record this, the current top clear is a 152. So a whole 5 ranks down in the highest pit clear. Sorcerer was previously at the top. Now it's technically 4th with that, with, Bone Spirit 154. Below that, you got Druid and Rogue 153, and then Sorcerer at 152. The differences between them, though, is minimal. And I expect as I'm making this video, or maybe in the next few days, they'll get to 153, be up there with the Rogues and Druids. Maybe they're all capable 154. There's very little between it, just the perfect run. Obviously, we're seeing things cap out now, where, all of that fighting is pretty much at the boss fight, most of the pit takes there, and your general gameplay, whether that's Infernal Hordes or whatever, you're absolutely crushing everything by being everywhere, by being super tanky, by being able to spread out your damage in wide areas and just smash everything the moment it even exists. It's still ultra strong, and as far as a nerf goes, I think it's pretty well done. You take the class that was ahead of everyone and bring it down a little bit, and now it's right about in line in terms of the pit clear numbers with the other top classes. That's, pretty well done. But to say that it's nerfed or bad or not the top build clearly for the class is wrong. And what's cool about Sorcerer is they have other great meta options in general too. There's testing with Firebolt and Chain Lightning that's been competitive. We've seen 150 clears with other builds than Lightning Spear, which is awesome. That's right behind the top build. So Sorcerer doing incredible, but overall Lightning Spear still the top build. Next up then is Druid, which is pretty much straightforward. There's different variants of the core build, but the idea is landslide with lightning/storm, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it storm slide. The idea is very simple though. You're using earthen sort of skills around the concept of landslide while using storm or lightning strike skills at the same time. The whole thing revolves around the key passive Nature's Fury, which causes earth skills to have a chance to trigger a free storm skill, and then storm skills have a chance to trigger your earth skills. So you're essentially getting free earth and storm skills regularly, spamming out your storm strikes, generating those lightning storms, generating landslides and those proccing off themselves, also triggering extra strikes or landslides as well. It's a pretty cool concept, kind of swapping between the two elements as it were, like a shaman more than a druid, though obviously you are using bear form for the seriously reliable survivability of that, making yourself very tanky. In the many cases that we look at footage of this doing good clears and so on, it's just kind of going toe to toe with everything. Dodging mechanics is not a concern, and also with the AoE nature of it, it does great in general gameplay, and especially in the Hordes where we're farming all that Aether or clearing tier 8s, it doesn't really have like a specific weakness like other builds that we're going to talk about today. This is a great thing to see because Druid deserves a strong build, but the problem with it for me is that it is a one playstyle, and this is your meta best by far option. It's a lucky one that it happens to do everything well from pits to infernal hordes and whatever, but ultimately because they only have the one very singular focus build that is as good as this, every Druid is pretty much just going to be playing this. So obviously very single-minded, and that's what maybe I'm hoping for the class in general in the new season, but also the DLC itself. I want to see Druid get a real facelift in general. I don't want to see Druid requiring uniques to get their shape-shifting forms and playstyles working properly. I think that should be part of the class, much like Necromancer should just have minions, whatever build it's running. And I am kind of concerned about Spiritborn, you know, kind of taking the place of Druid. I've literally played Spiritborn. I went to Gamescom recently and it was incredible. There were 4 styles: the gorilla, the eagle, the jaguar, and the centipede. But rather than becoming these things, they kind of summon in these allies to help them, these spiritual allies, again very shaman-y, where the Druid's meant to become the thing. So that's what I want to see for Druid. I want them to become the form more consistently, more control over that, more options during it, to give the class more separate identity from the Spiritborn. So, Necromancer. This is obviously my main class, so I have more intimate knowledge with it, and I'm personally not a fan of Necromancer in Season 5. I don't think that's a big secret. Their best build is undeniably Bone Spirit, but for all the wrong reasons it feels like. The truth is, Bone Spirit is a pit-pushing build, and it achieves its best form and most enjoyable form once you're so ultra-geared that, say, your resource gen is resolved. You have enough max resource to always be overpowering and always have ultra-hard-hitting overpowers at that. You got your 100% crit, and you've whittled away at all your affixes to still have 100% crit, but without over-committing to that on your affixes. All the ideal gear, alongside massive health pool, shielding, and overhealing, you know, fortify, to become as tanky as you possibly can. The results speak for themselves though, as the current highest clear as I make this video is a 154 by a Bone Spirit Necromancer, and previously the highest clear was by a Sorcerer before the nerf that occurred that brought them down to around 152 at this time of recording. So, Bone Spirit is the best pit pusher in the game right now for a build and the classes, and yet I don't like it, and I don't think Necromancer is in a good state in Season 5. That is again because Bone Spirit doesn't just work, it takes an extreme amount of gear to get to this optimal state. I found as a creator for the Necromancer class that, wow, demand for Bone Spirit builds was so high that even though I felt that you should be playing Blood Surge or maybe even Minion Necromancer until you've reached really high gear to then do Bone Spirit, people didn't want to hear it. The builds that I was making to try to talk about that and advise that were being not rejected, but had lower viewership, and the comments were all like, bro, just show us Bone Spirit. So I did before the ultra geared phase, and people weren't happy with that either. Then you got people playing Bone Spirit and finding, well, this takes a lot of setup to work. You have to be really careful with your cooldown management and, you know, the actual rotation. And also, guides aren't able to do it for you. Once you reach that 100% crit, again, you got to whittle away the affixes to get rid of overcapping on crit chance. You need to have a real understanding of the game and the class and stats to actually progress the build to the heights that you're seeing with the really high pit clears. So it's harder to play, it's harder to manage the gear and get the build working, and also, why are you going that hard to clear higher pit levels? I cleared a 120 like 3 weeks ago or something, comfortably, and knew I could push to, say, a tier 130. But personally, I was like, well, I don't need to do that, that's not what I want to do with my time. The hardcore grinders that do want to do that, you've seen them get over 150 now. But there isn't like a reward for this. Once you've got to the point in pits, maybe just over 100, you're getting the resources you need from it. There's not like a real reason to be doing that. That's why things like the Blood Surge build are going to be better for your average player. They're going to clear the pits really well. They're going to farm the infernal hordes for aether and resources and getting the drops and all that. Much better, much easier, maybe more enjoyable. And that's really our only proper meta option. Minion Necromancer's not in a great state right now. Bone Spear's not in a great state right now. All of Shadow builds in general did have an over nerf, and that had affected even the minion builds, essentially forcing the Necromancer into Bone Spirit as their only real viable big long-term option. And personally, I'm just not into it, and based on the player base of Necromancers dwindling super hard this season, it seems a lot of people aren't. So while Bone Spirit appears to be the best build for the season for Necromancer, I am not happy with the state of things, and they need more build variety like the other classes as meta options. And hopefully in the DLC we see some serious change to the class, the way it functions, really bringing a new life to the class we shall see. Next up then, it's time for us to talk about Rogue, which technically has different variations of the main build, as well as some other options that are decent, to be fair. But, you know, the best one is obviously andariels combined with barrage as the main source for proccing it. So andariels is the mythic unique that's actually good this season. On the lucky chance, it can trigger a poison nova that deals damage and poisons over 5 seconds in an area. The idea is to increase the damage of that proc as much as you can, and also make it proc as many times as possible. There are many ways to increase damage, just flat out in general, whether that's your key passive or uniques like Fist of Fate, which can randomly increase your damage from 1 to 300%, which is obviously insane, and that comes with a lot of lucky chance, perfect for this concept. There's also a new unique this season, the Crux, which makes a lot of cool stuff possible here. It basically places that totem down you might be seeing a lot. That gives you something to always attack, so you're never losing kind of uptime. It absorbs damage and then spreads it out at 20% effectiveness. This essentially means you've always got a kind of ricochet from barrage, playing around, say, preparation, to help reset your cooldowns and maintain the damage spam at all times. Rogue is Rogue though, it has utility in the base movement speed, and you could be running something like Shadow Step to get you targets or avoid stuff. It's got great sustain through the barriers that it creates, but it is funny to talk about a build that's kind of required to play a Rogue in the current meta that is a mythic unique required build. Andariels is easier to get than ever though. After all, we can farm any tormented boss to get the mythic unique drops, and getting over 50% lucky hit chance to kind of get things going is not an unreasonable ask. Saying that as a Bone Spirit player, as Necromancer with my 100% crit, 275 max resource, minimum to make sure overpower is always going, having enough essence gen, all this kind of requirements, just one item and lucky hit chance at 50% or higher feels okay to me. Like I said though, this build concept can be ran really well with other core concepts. Running Andariel, running lucky hit chance and all those stuff. It's just barrage is such a good pick because it's in a nice area per use. But other things like the classic Heartseeker build, that's still fantastic, don't forget, which is a totally different playstyle where you're doing basic attack spam, which was ultra strong and popular last season. So not only are they not stuck to Andariel's barrage, where they can run other Andariel versions, or totally other different builds like the Heartseeker one that are going to be meta relevant. So overall, I think this build is pretty fair to a new player trying to get into it. You just have to get Andariels, and then you're going to be pretty much good to go, enhancing it more and more with better items and better affixes. It is a very good build. I'll be interested to see what they do to prevent it being like the meta pick again in the launch of the DLC in the next season. Last up then, we're going to talk about Barbarians because they kind of have a complicated situation. They are overall the weakest class in Season 5. I think that's not necessarily up for debate, and I think Barbarians will tell you that themselves. Currently, in terms of pit clears, as I make this video, the highest clear that we're seeing is a 140 using Bash Barb. Bash Barb has some serious AoE issues, but it is their best single target build by far. The issue with pits is essentially still the final boss. Even though going into Season 5, they did rebalance things and made it so that the final boss has less health and, you know, they changed the echo mechanics around. The idea was that it would be less backloaded as an experience, where most of the time is spent just fighting a boss and avoiding one-shot mechanics. To be fair to them, they did give us that stacking buff, so if you make a mistake here or there, you won't just die, but, you know, make a few in a row, get more debuffs, you will die. So yeah, whatever. Ultimately, Whirlwind Barb, I think, is the better build between Bash Barb and Whirlwind Barb, but that's the problem with the class as a whole. They don't have a build that works for everything. Barbarian is playing Bash Barb for pushing pits because it needs that single target DPS, but playing Bash Barb in infernal hordes or even a lot of open world content where you're facing packs of enemies can be quite miserable, where Whirlwind is just super fun, super easy, and technically better in this season with the buffs to, you know, Dust Devils, and that being more viable as an option. Between the aspects of Devilish to generate free Dust Devils and Shouts also generating them, you're actually spamming these Whirlwinds out around yourself, around the core Whirlwind itself. So the Spin to Win just got more AoE, which is just fun to see. And as it is kind of a more one-button build around the cooldown, you just pop between the whirlwinds. Yeah, much like Blood Surge, as I was saying, it's super chill. And, you know, most of the endgame for a casual player, I would think is, say, Tier 7, Tier 8 Infernal Hordes, and this is going to do great there, and it's not terrible in single target. As we were shown in the early of the season by Rob2628, you're able to farm tormented bosses by standing still, making use of Inner Calm, pressing yourself in a corner, and just spinning. So it's not bad for the target ladder boss farming, because they're not really a threat anyway. play, and it's going to be your optimal choice for farming infernal hordes, where most of your resources are going to come, where most of your drops are going to come. It's the most important content. And if you really want to do pits, it's going to be fine around the 90s to 100s that matters for your casual player. So between the two, I'm leaning on whirlwind still, but I know that it has serious single target issues, and then bash barb, terrible in AoE for similar reasons. So you have two builds that are working, and neither of them are particularly potent or good compared to the other classes in their top builds, and you gotta swap between them depending on what content you're doing. So it's just awkward. But there you have it. That is our overview of the current best builds for Season 5. Now we're mid-season towards the later end of it. I think Rogue and Sorcerer are doing great. Just continue with that. Druid needs more options, but they're at least strong. Where Necromancer and Barbarian, I just feel that their current best builds are too single-minded. And in the case of Necromancer, Bone Spirit just isn't a popular build to play, it would seem. So we'll see how things change with the DLC. Hopefully, we all get a big change to the core principles of the classes. For now then, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.